Stage 24, the subjunctive. Okay, it sounds terrible, but it's really not. Let's take a look at English first. What's the difference between these three sentences? Clean up that mess. This morning I made a mess, and I might clean up that mess. Pause it now and think about the difference. Well, hopefully you thought about this difference. Clean up that mess expresses a command. This morning I made a mess expresses more of a statement of fact. And finally, I might clean up that mess expresses a hypothetical. So three different states of being are being expressed here. And those different states of being are called moods. If you're like, what? That's okay, keep going. Moods, all verbs in any language, have what's called a mood. That does not mean that they are happy verbs or sad verbs. No, 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 no. So let's think about mood for a minute. We just had this vocab word. Mood comes from modus, which means manner. And according to Wheelock's Latin, mood refers to the manner of indicating the action or state of being of the verb. In normal everyday speaking, that means how is the verb acting in a sentence? What is the idea that is being expressed? So, there are three moods of any language, English and Latin both. Here we go. Number one mood is the imperative mood, and that is always expressing a command, as in clean up that mess. When you express a fact, something that just simply happened, then the statement is said to be, the verb is said to be in the indicative mood, as in this morning I made a mess. Hey, it just happened. I'm sorry. I made a mess. And then the third mood that we have, both in English and Latin, is called the subjunctive. And that is where you express a hypothetical or a potential action or a situation where there's a little bit of doubt or vagueness, as in, I might clean up that mess. Or if you look just at this first little clause here, when I was a kid, ... Because think about it, when I was a kid is pretty darn vague. Was that when you were 5, 10, 15? Because there's a big difference between those. Moving right along, what does the subjunctive look like? Because that's the one we're going to focus on in Latin. Well, there are four tenses of it: present, imperfect, perfect, and pluperfect. This year, we're only going to focus on perfect and pluperfect tenses of the subjunctive because they are the most common by far. The subjunctive can also be used in independent and dependent clauses. This year, we're going to learn about 5 dependent clauses because that is how subjunctives are used by far in Latin. So remember, subjunctive is you're expressing something that's hypothetical or there's a little bit of doubt or vagueness, versus indicative and imperative. Indicative, you're expressing a statement of fact. Imperative, you're expressing a command. Obviously, all the verbs you've seen so far in Latin have been either imperative or indicative. Now let's take a look specifically at these two tenses of the subjunctive and what they look like in Latin, and then we'll move on to our first dependent clause, in other words, how they're used in a Latin sentence. So, the imperfect subjunctive, I'm going to take the example amo amare, our good old friend, meaning to love. You form the imperfect subjunctive by taking the second part, aka the infinitive, and then you add stuff to it. You add either an m, s, t, mus, tis, or unt, depending on who the subject is. But look, this is the weird thing. Amaret, for example, it's imperfect subjunctive, it's the infinitive, plus a t after it, but it's translated he, she, it was verbing. In other words, it's translated just like a normal old imperfect bombas bat, bamus batis bond. Whoa. The difference will be how these verbs are used in sentences. If you saw amabat, that is a statement of fact. If you saw amaret, then something's going on where there's maybe a little bit of vagueness or doubt or hesitancy. Okay? So there it is, the imperfect subjunctive. Now let's take a look at the pluperfect subjunctive. This time we're going to take the third part of the verb, amawi. We're going to add in 3 mysterious letters, S, S, E, and we see that, And then we add those same endings after that. MST, mus, tis, or unt, depending on whom the subject is. If those MST, mus, tis, unt endings look familiar, it's because with the exception of M, they are essentially your present tense verb endings. Just sing your song. And look at this. Ama we set. It's translated he, she, it had loved, just like ama werat, normal old pluperfect, would be translated he, she, it had loved. Once again, the difference is in the idea that's being expressed. If you see ama we set, it's subjunctive, so there's some sort of vagueness or doubt or hesitancy or potential action. If you see ama werat, aka the normal pluperfect, that's just a statement of fact. So now we're going to learn our first use of the subjunctive, our first dependent clause. It's called a circumstantial clause, or as I like to say, a circumstantial clause. You'll understand why in a minute. This clause is used to describe the general circumstances of when an action is occurring. So we're not being very specific. Think back to the example at the beginning, when I was a kid. That is a circumstantial clause. It gives me some sort of vague general idea, but it doesn't pinpoint the exact time that an action occurred. In Latin, they're really easy to spot. They always start with the word cum, as in circumstantial. But cum here has a special meaning. It does not mean with, but instead means when. Look at these two examples. Cum custodes dormirent, captivi e carcere effugerunt. There's dormirent. Look back at your notes. Is that imperfect or pluperfect subjunctive? That's right. It's imperfect subjunctive because it's the infinitive plus this nt ending. And it's translated like a normal old imperfect. When the guards were sleeping, the prisoners escaped from the prison. Why is it subjunctive? Because there's a little bit of vagueness about when exactly that action occurred. How about this next sentence? Cum modestus ad pontem adveniset, equus constitit. Adveniset, look at that. S-S-E plus something after it. That's easy. That's pluperfect subjunctive, translated like normal old pluperfect indicative. When Modestus had arrived at the bridge, the horse stopped. Again, tells me the general time frame of when he arrived, but doesn't pinpoint it exactly. So there it is, the subjunctive. Thank you. I'll see you.